I think we may still have people joining us, but I always hate to penalize people who are on time, and we want to end right at 4:30. So it's a beautiful day. Thank you all for joining us. For those of you who are new to this series, the series is called Casco Bay Coastal Academy, but obviously in this era, it's not limited to coastal communities, and that's the beauty of virtual workshops. The goal of the series is to build the knowledge base of municipal board members and staff and others, and provide information about critical coastal issues, and also some skills training to help support project planning and implementation. My name is Victoria Boundy. I'm with Casco Bay Estuary Partnership, and I'll just briefly introduce my partners who helped me work on this series. We have New England Environmental Finance Center, Martha Shields and Chloe Shields, not related, close. From Cumberland County Soil and Water Conservation District, we have Damon Yakovlev and Heather Hunt. And last but not least, from Greater Portland Council of Governments, we have Harold Spetla, who's doing the tech hosting. And he's got some AmeriCorps Coastal Resilience Fellows with him that are helping with tech and also helping with facilitation. Before I briefly go over the agenda, I would like to find out who else is in the room. So we have a couple quick polls to find that out. Harold, if you would show the first poll, and if you guys could all answer the questions. I see you're all well versed in poll taking on Zoom, so that's good. What a good mix of affiliations here. Okay, why don't we try the next poll? All right, great, good mix of familiarity with the program. Beginning with Habitat is an award-winning program that's being used as a model nationwide, but I think a lot of people are not familiar with it, with all the amazing resources that they offer. So we're gonna find out more about that. Let me quickly go over the agenda. So for the first 35 minutes, we're gonna hear from 3 staff from the Beginning with Habitat program. And they'll tell us about all of the great tools that they offer and information that they provide for municipalities, land trusts, and others. Then we'll open it up for about a 20-minute Q&A. And then we will zoom into breakout rooms where we'll get a chance to do a deeper dive into the program's online map viewer. And you can find out. And it's kind of, we're getting an exciting sneak peek today of a brand new map viewer. So if you've been on before, this is a new and improved map viewer. So you guys will get a sneak peek of that today. Then we'll come back and any more lingering questions, and then we'll get you out of here about 4:30. So I'd like to remind everyone to mute themselves. And when we get to the Q&A, you can either ask questions in the Q&A feature, or you can do the raise hand, either physically raise your hand or the Zoom way. So without further ado, let me introduce Amanda Cross from the Beginning with Habitat program.
Great. Thank you so much, Victoria, for that introduction. And thanks to you all for being here on what's the nicest day we've had in the last couple of days. I realize I'm competing with the sunshine right now, and so I really do appreciate you all taking the time to be with us today. I also want to thank the Casco Bay Estuary Partnership for inviting us to be a part of this series. As Victoria mentioned, we're a longstanding program. You'll hear about us here in a couple minutes, but with certainly time and staff turnover and different priorities that we all have, as the poll suggests, over a quarter of you aren't familiar at all with the program. And so the opportunity to be able to talk to many of you today is one of the sort of nice benefits of COVID, if you will, and that we can all come together in an hour-and-a-half time and get a very quick introduction to the resources that our program provides. I'm a wildlife resource supervisor at the Maine Department of Inland Fisheries and Wildlife. I coordinate our Beginning with Habitat program, and I'm also our climate change coordinator. I'm lucky to be joined here today by two of our staff members, Joseph Roy and Michelle Warner, who you'll hear from in a little bit. They're waving there on the screen. And we also have support from Bill Hancock, a support cartographer who used to be with our program for many years. I'm going to share my screen here and kick us off through an introduction of what we offer. And if folks could just give me a thumbs up when you see that coming across on your screen. Okay, great. Hopefully it looks like a slide. All right. So what is Beginning with Habitat? You'll hear me refer to the program as BWH throughout our talk today. It's a mouthful to say, both the acronym and the full name. But what we are is a non-regulatory, landscape-based partnership that aims to conserve the sufficient habitat to support all breeding populations of native Maine fish and wildlife species. That's a big goal. And it's a goal that requires all of us working together using the many different tools in our toolboxes that we have to achieve that goal. We are housed at the Maine Department of Inland Fisheries and Wildlife. We are referred to as the premier non-regulatory biodiversity conservation program. Well, what does that actually mean? It means that 20 years ago, an idea was brought forth by a variety of partners to create a clearinghouse for natural resource information, understanding that Maine is a home rule state. Our towns create their own rules and regulations to administer different natural resource protection efforts. And so given that we're a home rule state, ensuring that communities that are making local decisions have the best available information on what is within their towns in a clear and transparent way was a major goal that was brought forth 20 years ago. And that goal, that mission has remained. We just celebrated our 20th anniversary last year, and that makes us the longest running partnership of its kind in the Northeast and perhaps in the nation. We have been recommended as a program model for all states in the nation, and there are many other sort of analogous programs across the Northeast that are similar to the mission of Beginning with Habitat. Like I said, we're housed at the Maine Department of Inland Fisheries and Wildlife. We're a rather small program. We are comprised of 2 permanent staff, so myself and Michelle Warner. We also are lucky to have 2 contracted staff with us as well. As I mentioned, Joe Roy, our private lands wildlife biologist, who just joined our team in December and is taking on sort of a new focus of the program that you'll hear, an additional focus of the program that you'll hear in a little bit. And then Bill Hancock, our longstanding cartographer, who retired recently, but came back to help us support some mapping efforts. So we're lucky to have both the full-time staff and the contracted staff to support the program. So that's what we look like sort of employee and staffing wise. But really the strength of Beginning with Habitat, the long-standing nature of this program that has allowed it to, persist over decades, is that we're a partnership. And we're a broad and diverse partnership of many, many different entities. I may have missed some of our partners. I tried to get all of them here on the screen, but of many, many different entities involved in natural resource conservation, from Maine Audubon to Maine Woodland Owners of Maine, Maine Coast Heritage Trust, DOT. So the whole conglomerate of folks across the state who help directly manage or provide data and information for natural resource conservation planning. I want to go a little bit into the science that underlies the Beginning with Habitat model. The idea for the Beginning with Habitat model came from a foundational study that was produced in 2000, so over 20 years ago at this point. And basically, this study was aimed at looking at how can we take what's called a coarse filter approach to conservation in Maine. What that means is how, if you translate it, it means how can you get the most bang for your buck? Meaning, where can we conserve large areas of habitat in the state that's going to conserve the most amount of species, that's going to keep our habitats healthy and productive? How can we do that? How can we plan proactively for where that needs to occur? And so this study was authored in 2000, and effectively what it says is that if we focus our conservation planning on a certain key resources, key features of our landscape, we'll be able to continue to support the majority of vertebrate species that are currently existing in Maine. You don't have to read the text that's on the screen in front of you, but what you'll see are several names that are underlined. And these are people who contributed to that original study 20 plus years ago. And the names that I've underlined are folks who are either still with the program directly as part of our steering committee, or are still part of our department and weighing into what we provide and what we produce. So there are people who have been a part of this effort for decades. And while Michelle, Joe, and I are sort of representing the partnership today through the presentation, I just want to point out that this is truly a group effort over many, many years. Okay, so what are we trying to do with this program? So the whole underlying idea is to balance growth and biodiversity conservation. The underlying science piece of that is that if you look at where wildlife species occur on the landscape and plant species occur on the landscape, and you plot out where the most diversity is and where is the most diversity of species that are at risk, you'll find that they tend to occur, as you might guess, in southern and coastal Maine. Now, Maine is a very interesting place from a wildlife standpoint because we're right at the crossroads between ecosystems that are more characteristic of places south of us and ecosystems that are more characteristic of places north of us. So we're right in that mixing zone. And so we have a really unique conglomerate of animals that live here and plants as well. And so where you're getting a lot of that mixing, you're seeing kind of in these graphics that are here on your screen along that southern and coastal region of the state. So I presented kind of three ideas here in front of you, sort of where we're seeing concentrations of at-risk reptiles in red, plant species in general, where the greatest diversity is in that dark green color, and then our concentrations of at-risk bird species, again, kind of tracking along those areas that are in southern and coastal Maine. Now, all of us, or many of us being in the Casco Bay region, I think many of us know that a lot of the growth and development that happens in the state is pretty much overlapping and tracking the same areas where we see our greatest species conservation. So the idea with the Beginning with Habitat program is not to say, don't develop, don't grow, but rather to say, okay, if we know on our landscape where these biodiverse important places are, is there a way we can think ahead and say, these are areas that would support development and growth, and here are areas that may be less suitable for that based on those biodiversity spots. Again, understanding that Maine is a home rule state, this information that's presented through the program is strictly non-biased information. What towns and planning entities do with this information is ultimately up to those towns and planning entities. So anything that we present here today or through our maps or down the road, if you work with us, again, it's presented in a neutral way, ideas of how to incorporate it, but with the understanding that ultimately those decisions happen often at the town level, at the landowner level, et cetera. So the graphic I pulled up here on the right-hand side, if you're looking at this graphic of Maine, this is projected land use changes into 2060. And this is from a partnership called the New England Landscape Future Explorer. And basically it's what you would imagine, that most of the high density development, even low density development, is really tracking along that southern coastal line up sort of along the I-95 corridor. And so this is where we have the overlap of understanding where growth and development is happening, understanding where our species are, and trying to think proactively about how we can balance both. Even though this idea was put forth 20 plus years ago, we continue to have trends that point to the need for this type of approach moving forward. As part of the Maine Climate Action Plan, the Eastern Research Group identified that in Maine, we're still continuing to lose about 10,000 forested acres annually across the landscape. So the idea here again is that if we can inform where planning projects are happening, where development is happening in a way that's consistent with maintaining biodiversity, that's going to be better in the long run for keeping species off the endangered species list, for keeping healthy fish and wildlife, and for keeping healthy human communities as well. Okay, so I'm going to give you sort of an overview of what some of our products look like, or what some of our tools look like. Michelle's going to take a deeper dive into this information. And then when we get in breakouts, we'll take a super deep dive into this information and play around with some of the maps. So let's take a town in the Casco Bay region. You get extra points if you can figure out which town this is. Put it in the chat box. I know I saw some folks in the invite list that should probably know what this is right off the bat, but I'll try to not give it away. So take a town. If you overlay areas of water, important aquatic features, things like wetlands, riparian areas, that's where you're getting a lot of species moving around. Obviously, you're getting all of those human health values as well in terms of purifying drinking water, aquifer recharge. If you focus conservation efforts in those aquatic features, then overlay things like important plant and wildlife habitats. So things like, where are our turtles nesting? Where are our really rare dragonflies? Where are the important areas for shorebirds and wading birds? Overlay that information. Then also think about, where do you have the big chunks of habitat on the landscape? So not necessarily the wetlands, not necessarily where the rare turtles are nesting, but where do you just have large blocks of forest, large blocks of intact habitat? If you overlay that stuff all together, you can come up with a blueprint for your town or your service region that can conserve 85% of all the vertebrate species in Maine. The idea there is that thinking about wetlands and riparian areas, thinking about those areas or species that require kind of species-focused conservation, like I said, turtle nesting areas, and thinking about those within the context of where's the remaining intact habitat on the landscape. If we can plan to help conserve those types of features, we'll be able to keep 85% of our vertebrates here in Maine. The remaining 15% of those species often require some sort of species-specific intervention that's not going to be captured by what we call this coarse filter approach. I see some chats coming in here. I'm going to see if anyone got the town right. Yes, Harpswell, and yes, you're right. Phippsburg does show up as well. Very good. Okay. So I want to define something here really quickly before we move forward. When I say the word conservation, I think we often have a variety of ways to define that word. And so I want to make sure that we're speaking the same language when we're talking about conservation as beginning with habitat views it. So conservation means, to many of us, I think, traditional fee and easement lands, so land acquisition. And that's certainly part of the beginning with habitat model. So figuring out where you have the opportunities, where are the best places to conserve lands through fee or through easement. But we also want to think about those other strategies that help conserve species and their habitats. So things like management of private lands. For example, here's an image here on the slide from Scarborough Marsh, where there was an effort to create some New England cottontail habitat. Also thinking about habitat restoration. So where can we restore things like tidal flow? Where can we restore fish passage? So as we were thinking about conservation today and talking about conservation, I want you all to put on your very broad conservation hats and think about all the tools that we can use to help conserve species and habitats, both in terms of public lands, but also on private lands as well. Michelle will go into greater detail about this information, but the core of the Beginning with Habitat data approach is based on this core map set. It's going through those 3 tenets that I talked about, focusing on where are the riparian and wetland features in a town, where are the important species and communities, both plants and animals within the town, and then what are sort of the bigger landscape focused things like large habitat blocks and areas of wildlife connectivity. Those are the 3 core pieces, the Beginning with Habitat package. There's also regional information too that we provide that can be helpful. So one of these tools that's been extremely helpful, that Bill Hancock was one of the major authors of, was this Co-Occurrence Model. And what it does is it takes all of this information that we provide 30+ layers of information. It takes many of those layers, especially the ones that are particularly important to fish and wildlife and plants, and it overlays them together and helps direct a town immediately to where are likely the areas of biodiversity hotspots in town versus where are the areas that may not be as high in value for biodiversity. This model can be customized to a town to bring in other types of values. So for example, recreational areas that a town may value, other types of historic features a town may value. So there are ways to adapt to this co-occurrence model to a town, but that's this one product I wanted to point out because it's a way to quickly summarize everything you might be seeing in the other more detailed maps as you dig into what we provide. Another piece of important regional information that we offer is an assessment of what are called focus areas of statewide ecological significance. There are about 140 of these across the state, and what they are at a statewide level, the key areas where we have the greatest overlaps of rare plants, rare animals, rare habitats within a context of intact watersheds, intact terrestrial habitats, things like that. So where are the areas on the landscape where we have the most biodiversity concentration? So there's information in our packages about those regional and statewide priorities as well. And we'll get a chance, I think, in the breakouts to talk more about these. So overall, I talked a bit about the spatial data we provide. So the maps, map packages, you'll see more of these in the breakouts. We also provide a variety of information, so tools on how to conserve riparian areas, how to help transportation align with wildlife crossings. We also provide technical assistance too. If you get these map packages or planning packages and you throw up your hands and say, where do I start? We can help assist you with that as well to walk through some of this information that we're giving you. And our key users, they're broad. It's many of you today, so municipal representatives, conservation commissions, planning boards, but also land trusts are a major user group of our information. I know there's some land trust representatives here as well today. And more recently, we've taken on a landowner focus as well. That was always an original part of the Beginning with Habitat model, to have these 3 groups as our targets to work with. But not until Joe joined our team have we had the capacity to really bring in that aspect of our outreach as well. The idea being that Maine is 94% privately owned. And so habitat conservation, wildlife stewardship is often happening in partnership with private landowners. And so being able to provide that direct nexus to technical assistance for that group of users is obviously a really important core use of our program. just a quick kind of snapshot before I turn it over to Michelle here in a second of what our small but busy team has been able to do. Many of us are wearing multiple hats within the program, but over the last year, we've been able to provide information for many different comprehensive plans that towns are working on, complete packages for towns, 44 towns that are doing municipal comprehensive planning, produced over 134 customized digital packages, reviewed comprehensive plans, led workshops, etc. And I point this out because all of this work that we're doing and providing to people and towns and groups ultimately results in real conservation change on the landscape. As part of our Wildlife Action Plan, which is a statewide plan that addresses at-risk species conservation across Maine, we track the number of projects that people are doing to help conserve habitats and species. And at last count, I didn't check it today, but I did check it last week, we had over 8,500 projects that people are doing across the state proactively in a non-regulatory way to conserve species. And to me, that's an impactful number. That is a lot of action going on across the state to make a difference for wildlife. And that's because all of you are doing that. All of you are taking those actions. So I just want to put the work that we're sharing today within the context of the greater state of wildlife here in Maine. And like I said, what we provide today helps support our Wildlife Action Plan, which again is aimed at keeping species that are on the decline, keeping them from declining so much that they end up getting listed on either the federal or the state Endangered Species Act. Everything that we're providing today helps support those species that are most at risk from declining even further. The information we also provide helps support Maine's recently released Climate Action Plan, which was released in December of 2020. In that action plan, there are a variety of recommendations for providing technical assistance and support to private landowners and towns. And so much of what we do helps align well with planning for a resilient Maine into the future. So with that high-level overview, a quick dive into what we do, I'm going to turn it over to Michelle Warner to walk us through some of the specific web and map products that we offer.
Thanks, Amanda. I know we can't hear you, but everyone should give Amanda a hand. That was a great intro to our program. Like, thank you, Amanda. I don't think I can beat that, but I'll try. So let me share my screen. Are you guys seeing the website Begin with Habitat? Yep, awesome. So with the poll results, I was really surprised that only 4% of you are familiar with Beginning with Habitat. So thank you everyone for joining to get a deeper dive into our small little program, the little program that could. I'm going to give you a quick overview of our website and our mapping resources that I provide. We recently just did a revamp of our website. If the 4% of you that have been familiar with Beginning with Habitat, things look a little different over here. We updated our website. It's a little bit more user-friendly. We broke up resources for our main user groups into tabs. If you scroll down here, if you would like to showcase some of your conservation actions that Amanda was explaining in her last 2 slides, you can get started here. I don't have enough time to explore that tool with you, but if you have any questions or want me to take a deeper dive with you at another time, I can do that. Just reach out to me. So let's get started. So here are the different tabs. If you're a town, land trust, landowner, you just click on your tab. and it'll provide you with the information that you'll need for your planning needs. And we have conservation strategies, case studies, a toolbox, and this will bring you to the map page. The About section, it gives you a little bit of background about who we are, who our partners are, what we do, conservation strategies, and some success stories. The conservation library, we're constantly adding to this. We're updating it. You see up here the conservation tools. We're also updating this with our I&E department. This will have nice little pictured tabs right like this with online mapping resources. We'll have online mapping resources for one with climate change. We will have the mainstream viewer, Audubon's wind map, interactive map will also be displayed on here as well, and many more. So this is constantly being updated with some of our partners' online tools, PDFs for guidance for managing your backyard, different species management guides. So feel free to take a dive into this. A lot of cool, interesting resources for you to find here. You can also download our Beginning with Habitat Toolbox in a fun little PDF. And another link, if you need assistance, this will send us a message to everyone in our program. And we'll get back to you as soon as we can to assist you in your needs. And if you see here, there's also a link for landowner resources, and that will connect you to the landowner resource page. Contact, again, this will help guide you to who, what you're looking for and who can best assist you. Amanda for presentation, comprehensive and open space planning, and assistance with habitat, connectivity, and climate change questions. I am your map person. If you are needing any layers, digital data, or paper maps of your town, feel free to please reach out to me. And then Joe, he will provide you with technical assistance for landowners, foresters, and management for various wildlife species. And he'll also help you with your management plan. And Joe will take a deeper dive into that when I pass it on to him. And we also like to highlight all of our partners and the things that they do. And we have links to their pages here and an email for some of them. Nope, just links for them. So if you have specific questions that are related to our partners, you can easily find their links here. And now let's dive into the fun stuff, the maps. This is where you'll find all the Beginning with Habitat maps. When you first log into our website, you just go to the Maps tab right here, and you can find all of our online maps. Online data map database, you can find all of our archived maps, and they're listed here. If you want new updated map information, let me go back here. You can request a large paper map. You just fill out this form stating the town. Please fill it all out. It helps us with our record keeping. The number of maps you're requesting, the use of maps, and any comments that you may have for me or other Beginning with Habitat staff. And here you just, if you're requesting digital data, pretty much the same form. I can send that to you digitally through the share drive, or if you would like a CD, I can still print out CDs for you. And now, online map viewer. Currently, this, for those of you who are familiar, you've seen these map viewers, you've probably used them and accessed them. We are gonna showcase you our new mapping viewer. It combines all the mapping resources in these 3 maps into one handy tool. I'll just take a deep dive, a quick dive, just to show you for those who haven't used this. Since the new viewer isn't live yet, it should be next week. But if you are interested in taking a little bit of a dive after this, I'll just do a quick overview. I know we're getting low on time. So this is the riparian map. It just shows you the wetlands, riparian buffers, wells, etc. Let's dive into Harpswell. As you can see, there's the different features are on. I'm used to the new one. But anyway, feel free to take a dive into the different maps. This one is map 2, plant. This is just an agreement screen of the different layers. You can toggle layers on and off. Zoom into your town, type in your town here, and it'll zoom you right into the resources. And again, if you have any questions utilizing these viewers, it's going to look a little bit different than the new viewer. I will do a brief overview of the new viewer, but you can click on the different resources that you're interested in, and it'll give you the description and the name of those layers and the resources within the map. And then map 3 is conserve lands, and it's set up similar to map 2. So let's jump over to our new mapping viewer, which most of you will see in the breakout groups. All right, so this is the new mapping viewer. I recommend that you guys take the tour. It breaks down the mapping viewer and gives you an understanding how to use it. Here you can see that all the resources in those 3 separate maps are broken down into this one handy map. Now you do not have to toggle between 3 separate mapping apps. It's all here in this nice handy little package. And I just want to make sure that everyone knows that if you want to see layers within a certain section, make sure you have those boxes checked. And here you can and make sure you click on the folder, because that will display layers that are within that folder. I'll just dive down to Harpswell again. So let's click some of these on so we can see what's happening down there in our friendly town of Harpswell. Okay, and you may see that some of these are grayed. And just as a note, we are still working on this behind the scenes, so some layers and functions may not work in your breakout groups. And the layers that are grayed out, they will turn on when you zoom in. As you can see, we have all those layers that are in those other maps are right here. It makes it easier for your planning purposes to have everything right here. You can see everything layered on top of each other. I know that us at Beginning with Habitat are pretty excited about this tool that you guys can use to make your planning a lot easier. And you can also change the base maps based upon what you want to utilize our maps for. You can print off your own custom map that you can print off at home, 8 by 11. If you want to go out in the field, whatever, this is a great mapping tool. Also, the legend just gives you a brief description about what those layers are. And it also gives you the contact information for the program or organization that had created those layers. So if you want to know more information, feel free to click those links. And this tool is disabled because we're still working on this viewer. But if you want another way, if you want to know more information about a specific layer, you can search for it here. They'll provide you with an email and a website where you can gain further information. And I think that's about it for me. Does anyone have any questions before I pass it along to Joe?
There are some questions in the chat.
Oh, okay.
Amanda, the first one that I see is curiosity about the impervious cover data. How current is the data and at what pixel resolution?
I'm gonna let Michelle tackle that one as our map person.
I'm trying to find the comments, but I don't think I can see them because I'm presenting. Where can you say that one more time?
Yep. Impervious cover data. How current is it and at what pixel resolution?
I think it's at the top of the legend. If you go up again, Michelle, the developed land impervious surfaces. You're really close, right? A little bit further up from there. A little bit further up, one more up, right there. Got it.
Yes, so if Phil Hancock is still on, I'm pretty sure that this was just updated recently this year. And
yeah, and
so
you don't have to spend a lot of time on it. I'm kind of curious for kind of selfish reasons. I'm a stormwater guy, so impervious cover is really important to me. And I'm always looking for more recent data and at a fairly fine resolution too. But somebody else had a really good question about whether or not this data can be downloaded from your site. And if that was possible, that would be super cool too. So
it cannot be downloaded, but I can, if you shoot me an email, I can provide you the most up-to-date information. We keep our layers updated regularly. We do regular updates either monthly or quarterly based upon when the information is given to us. We are not the creators of all these layers. So our information and data is as up to date as our stakeholders and the agencies that created that data.
Yeah,
Great.
Fred, and that's a great question. And I think there's another question about downloadable information, and that's a request we've gotten for a while. And it's something that we've been thinking about sort of for future iterations of our online tools. And I think the one complicating factor of that is where we are serving up partner data, and often there are certain restrictions on the use of that data. So that's been sort of the biggest reason we haven't provided sort of an instant download feature on the website itself. That being said, most of the data that we provide is downloadable at the Maine Office of GIS. And in the new viewer, we now have a link that goes directly to that data. So you could download it that way directly, or also, if you wanted the full package of information, just shoot Michelle an email and she can provide that to you. But it is definitely a request we've heard, and it would be great to provide. So that is something we're talking about, how to be able to do that, but also be able to, you know, adhere to sort of our partner data's restriction on what they provide.
In the interest of time, Amanda, did you mention that Joe, we were going to hear a little bit from Joe as well, and then we will have time for more Q&A after the breakouts as well. So keep the questions coming, and if we don't cover them all in the presentation, then we'll be sure and answer them, you know, via email or online.
Yeah, I think we now have sort of an integrated Q&A as part of the talk, and that's fine.
Yeah.
That works. Yeah. So I'm gonna turn it over here to Joe Roy to tell us a little bit about his efforts as the new landowner outreach biologist, and then I'll have a couple more slides to wrap up with, and then we can dive more into questions.
Hi all, I'm Joe Roy. As I've been introduced, I'm the private lands wildlife biologist. I work primarily with individual landowners who are looking to increase the management activities on their property. So generally I work with most people who own 10 acres or more and help them with any sort of inquiries they have relating to technical assistance for wildlife management or financial assistance for wildlife management. I work closely with a lot of our partners to help pull in applicable resources when I'm dealing with landowners, whether that's a partner that has an incentive for a certain management type or a geographic area that they work with. And I also help connect people with federal resources for wildlife management. So if you're a landowner and you're looking to come up with a wildlife management plan and you live in the state of Maine, I'm the person you want to talk with. So.
Great, thanks so much, Joe. We're working on cloning machines for both Michelle and Joe to be able to provide even more capacity.
Any lead on the cloning machine would be appreciated.
Yes, I'm working on it.
Yeah, because I should note, sorry, Amanda, I'm sorry about that. I should note that I serve in a statewide role, so I tell people I work from, you know, Kittery to Madawaska, so, you know, anywhere in between. I will help people out and, when applicable, provide field visits and stuff like that to walk over property with landowners. So
great.
I'm done for real this time.
Thanks, Joe. Can everyone see a slide again that says planning applications? Okay, wonderful. So there's a variety of historical ways people have used, beginning with habitat information. As Michelle mentioned, the information is not intended for regulatory purposes. If you are applying for a permit, that goes through a different channel depending on what kind of permit you're applying for, either through IF&W's Environmental Review Program or through the Department of Environmental Protection. So the regulatory piece is outside of our wheelhouse. But if you're doing early project scoping, if you're doing municipal comprehensive planning, open space plans, you're interested in stewardship, management, strategic acquisition, conservation planning, restoration activities, and other non-regulatory pieces, our information could be helpful. Things like comprehensive plans, beginning with habitat, is a required element in those comprehensive plans. So that's one application where we see our information quite often. But there are becoming new and creative ways to use the information as well. I recently discovered the city of Auburn here created an ArcGIS story map using our beginning with habitat information to tell a story about the natural resources in town. So reach out to us if you have sort of one of these new ideas for using the information, and we'll work with you to help make it possible. Just a couple more wrap-up slides here. So, you know, why use this information? So, you know, I think Michelle used the term, it's one-stop shopping. It's a lot of natural resource information all in one place. We're consuming it from the authors of that information. So it's the updated information that's available all together. It's user-friendly. We try to make it such that it's easy to navigate and understand, and you can quickly, you know, get links to data and resources and things like that. It's consolidated all in one place. Like I said, it's up to date, and I would say it's empowering because it allows you to know whether you're a town or a landowner or someone doing statewide planning, kind of what's out there publicly available on the landscape. Everything that we provide through our program is public data. We're not providing private data. So we're providing information that's in the public realm. And so it allows us to all sort of be on the same page about what's out there in terms of information. That's the info side. The technical assistance side, you know, is a very important piece. And that's the piece where we can help. Joe, for example, can help look at a property and say, yeah, you're interested in songbirds. Here are the songbirds that I think would best benefit from this particular management practice you're proposing. And by the way, that practice could also benefit turtles and salamanders. So there's that piece of it. But I would say the other important piece is really the network that we're a part of. So we're a partnership, but we're also working with many partners across the state. And so where we may not be the actual funding agency or the actual place that provides specific assistance on a certain topic, we can get you to that place. We can get you to the Maine Coastal Program or DEP for talking more about community resilience planning and support. So if you're not sure where to ask, feel free to reach out to us and we can get you where you need to be. So coming soon, we mentioned some of these things in Michelle's portion. We are planning on adding additional climate change information. I know that's very important to communities doing resiliency planning. So information on marsh migration from our partners at the Maine Natural Areas Program, information on resilient and connected landscapes. Look for that coming this summer. Also adding those co-occurrence models that I talked about to our online mapping tool. Right now you can get those models as PDFs, but we're looking to add those on to the interactive viewer itself. Also bringing in information from the mainstream habitat viewer so you can see more information on title restrictions and impoundments and things like that to help plan for aquatic connectivity. And then we're also working with our partners on revising statewide areas of ecological significance, those focus areas, bringing in new natural resource information, new species occurrences, and new climate change information as well. So there's a lot coming down the pipeline too. So with that, you have our contact information there. Feel free to reach out to any of us. And it looks like we do still have a few minutes here for question and answer before we go into breakouts.
We have about 2 minutes and then we will have time after the breakouts for more. But does anyone, if you could raise your hand if you have a question. And I think Damon, you're going to help me identify raised hands. Everybody good? Okay.
I don't see any raised hands.
All right.
Maybe
Well,
people want to get into the breakouts.
Yeah, we'll have another chance. So we're going to zoom into breakout rooms and get a chance to look at the maps more deeply at the online map viewer. And then we'll come back. And I'm sure at that point, people might have questions after having a chance to look at the maps. I see one question before we go, however, that just came in. How extensive is your data for the intertidal and just offshore areas?
I can tackle that one. So the intertidal data, there's a variety of data sets that we have, you know, eelgrass beds, shellfish areas, some information on intertidal habitats. That's coming from both the DEP, some of our data for tidal waterfowl and wading bird habitat, and also our DMR partners. So that information is really kind of not restricted, but it's really limited to sort of the near shore areas. It doesn't go very, very far offshore. We do, however, have information on seabird nesting islands and things like that. So really it's concentrated kind of near shore areas and some of those areas that are within state waters in our seabird islands.
Can you also be able to see all of those layers when you explore the mapping tool?
Good segue. Let's do that.
I don't know about everybody else, but that one moment between breakout room and returning back to the normal room, stresses me out.
When we were in our prep room getting ready for this meeting, I had the same panic, like, oh, I want to get, because we zoomed into a breakout just to test it out. And I felt like I was going to be stranded there. We only have 35 participants now, but maybe we lost some people. Sometimes that happens with breakouts, but they're still coming. So let's wait another couple minutes.
Roberta, would you mind finishing that up for me? If you're back. You got cut off.
Just a reminder now that we're back in the main group to mute your mics. And if there were some questions that came out of the breakout sessions that you have for Amanda and Michelle, that the other co-hosts leading those sessions may not have been quite as expert in the tool, the BWH team is back. So type those into the chat and we have another 10 minutes or so to answer them. And I can also introduce myself. I'm Chloe, I'm with the New England Environmental Finance Center.
Chloe, would it be helpful if I provided a couple overarching thoughts that came out of our group that I think might be helpful for everybody?
That sounds perfect. Yeah.
I think looks like we're all back. Yeah, so one thing that came up in our group was kind of the accuracy of the data, or if you find something that's incorrect. The conserved lands layer is a common one we hear from people on, and that, you know, it's not, there's a new parcel that's been acquired by the land trust or the town, and it's not showing up in the conserved lands layer. Any of that kind of stuff, I mean, you guys have all probably heard the saying about all maps lie, and it's true that as good of a product we try to put out there, we're not going to get it perfect. And so if you see something that does not pass that on the ground test, let us know. Michelle is one of the editors of the conserved lands layer. So if you have new parcel information, new conserved lands information, you know, reach out to her and she can help you get that information into that layer. You know, as much as we're putting information out, we really rely on those of you who are on the ground and know your towns better than we do to let us know if there's something that's not right so that we can correct it and make sure we have the most accurate information possible.
Thanks, Amanda. So there are actually a lot of really good questions rolling in that I can read out to you. I think the first one was just about the spatial resolution of the viewer and whether, I know we noticed this in our group, and actually some folks were quite surprised and pleased at how you could zoom in, and some of the impervious surface data was pretty fine resolution. But yeah, any plans to further increase the resolution of the tool, or any comments on that?
Sure. Yeah, we have kind of limited it where it's at, just because some of the layers that are within here. So, for example, some of the endangered species layers, some of the other habitat layers are really drawn on features with buffers, and so not wanting to zoom in so far and give kind of a you know, not basically zooming in and implying a precision on the data than we really have, I guess is the way to put it. So some of these features are mapped from aerial imagery, for example, some of the inland waterfowl and wading bird habitat. And so those boundaries are drawn based on aerial imagery. You know, I think the idea for limiting that zoom is so that you're not zooming in so far that you're saying, wait, hey, that, you know, that line is going right here and really it should be over there. So that was the rationale behind limiting the zoom. With any of this stuff, you know, it's a breathing, living thing. And so over time, if as data gets more accurate, as the precision gets more refined, you know, it might be one of those things that we look to doing in the future, is allowing for a closer zoom. But I know, I hear you. I look at my backyard on there, I'm like, oh, I wish I could just zoom in like 1 or 2 more levels.
Another quick but somewhat related question is, someone noticed that when you're clicking on one of those endangered species habitat buffer zones, it doesn't always tell you the species. And I know you told our kind of planning group the rationale for that, but if you can share that with everyone.
Yeah, that's a really important one. So you'll notice in that layer, some of the species, you will be able to get that species name. And for others, you'll see name withheld, or it'll say rare species. The reason that we do that is because the species that we're not giving a name to is a species that is of high collection risk. So things like turtles, for example, one of the biggest threats to our rare turtle species in Maine is illegal collection. There are also several plants that are also rare, that one of their biggest threats as well is illegal collection. So where this is a broadly available public map for those species, we have chosen to not provide those names publicly. That being said, of course, we have to balance, right? Conservation. If you don't know what you have, you don't know how to protect it. And so when a town, for example, is working on a comprehensive plan, you know, we can work with the town to talk about what is that resource, how best to protect it, and how best to communicate that conservation without it posing a potential collection risk to the species.
Great. There's a couple questions here about whether there's, you know, things that people didn't see in the tool, but they're not sure if they missed, or kind of giving you some ideas for the future, just maybe to toss those out to you quickly if you want to react. One was stream crossing locations. So I know we have the kind of road crossing locations. Another was folks were interested in shoreline steepness or kind of coastal erosion vulnerability. And then another one was invasive species. Are those types of layers anything that we missed or that may be coming in the future?
No, you didn't miss them. And I really like all of those ideas. For the stream crossing, some of that will come through when we add in the mainstream habitat viewer, which has many of those crossings that have been evaluated. I think there's something like 30,000 or so, I can't remember the exact number of publicly available ones. You know, I think but of course, there's also other information like DOT has a culvert database for their road network, bridges, that kind of stuff. You know, that's something that might be really interesting to add sort of as a locator feature. I think it's a great idea. The coastal erosion piece is a really interesting one. I don't know if that's come up before, but I would be really curious about exploring that as we're putting together this climate change package or package of layers that will go on the map. I think that would be a really interesting one to consider. And then the invasive species piece, you know, I don't know of a statewide layer. I mean, there's a lot of information and, you know, local information, towns will have information, IMAP invasives has things mapped in it, but I'd be curious to know sort of if there's a suggestion for what might be kind of a statewide layer that might be good to cover invasive species. So I'll throw that question back out to you guys.
Thank you. In the interest of time, I always like to let people out on time. First of all, I wanted to thank all of our presenters. You really should be cloned, all of you, because I don't know how you work statewide on all these different issues, but thank you so much for your great presentations. Thank you to all of our facilitators. You didn't have much time or much opportunity to learn the tool, but I think it was really great to have that deeper dive. A couple of things I want to mention. I will provide a link to, I'll email out a link to an evaluation. We'd really appreciate if you could fill that out. It's very short, and we're also looking for ideas for other topics that you'd like to see in this series. And then any planners, I will also send a link to get AICP credits. I put those in the chat, and we will also make all of these resources available, and I'll share the websites where you can find that material within maybe in about a week or so. And we will also save the chat and all the questions that we didn't get to and try to get those answered. So thank you to everybody who participated today. Get out and enjoy the beautiful weather while it's still here. And thanks again.
Thank you.